and he jumped off in front of my truck. And within a split second, I mean, I didn't have time to react. It happened that fast.
Take control of your life. Break the chains and rise. No more feeling powerless. No more shame. Take your power. Break out of the pain. Because it's more than fornication, more than procreation. It's not just self-stimulation. Sex energy is for creation and transformation into a new destination.
This is Porn Talk.
Porn Talk. Yeah. Change your heart from dark to light. Porn Talk. Yeah. Break free. Take back your power and rise. I said take back your power. I said take back your power. Take back your power and rise.
This is Porn Talk. Here is your host, Eric Zuzack.
We have someone here to empower us today. Michael Clegg joins us to share his journey of transformation, sparked by a life-changing tragedy after a fatal accident. Clegg had to face and rebuild himself, rediscovering a purpose he thought he had lost. Through his experience, Clegg developed his Leaders Go First philosophy and the Leadership Squad framework he uses to guide others from top executives to high school quarterbacks in creating connection, psychological safety, and resilience. Together, we'll discover how these principles can be applied to some of us overcoming addictions and helping you to find a renewed sense of purpose and an unwavering commitment to your goals. So please welcome Michael Clegg. Welcome, Michael.
And thank you for having me. That's quite an intro too, and great music, by the way. That was fun.
Thank you. And well, you're quite an amazing guy. Let's get right to it. What was the tragedy that changed your life?
In the spring of 2023, I was at a football tournament. We actually played in the championship, which we won, beating the arch rivals that we're playing this week. And it's the first time we've beaten them in 7 years. So you can imagine, like, parents were elated, the kids were elated, I was elated, just a ton of fun. So I hop in my truck to head home, and I was in the Charlotte area, which is where I am today, and had about a 45-minute ride home, and was driving. And on this part of the highway, on the interstate, it was pretty dark, not a lot of lights. It's out in the more of a rural part of Charlotte. And there was a gentleman standing on the bridge that I did not see. And I was on the interstate below the underpass, and he jumped off in front of my truck. And within a split second, I mean, I didn't have time to react. It happened that fast. And I ran over him, and he did not survive. And obviously that in and of itself is like, even telling the story, sometimes it's kind of like an out of body experience. Like, man, that did happen to me 18 months ago. And which isn't a long time, by the way. But, all I could think of was how quickly I could pull over off the interstate to go back and help him. And I do that, and I'm running up, the shoulder of the highway, and cars are still, flying by. And fortunately, there was a couple of bystanders that saw it happen that pulled over quickly to try and get the traffic to stop. And by the time I got back to the gentleman, it was clear that he didn't survive, which I'm not surprised. And that just set an entire string of events for me. And as you can imagine, self-reflection isn't exactly something that comes to mind when something like that happens. I'd received tons of messages. And by the way, obviously they closed down the interstate that evening. And fortunately, I left before my team left, because I also one of my kids, one of my son, was on that team also. So it very well could have been him or any of his teammates, or they could have driven by that. But fortunately, they left a little later than I did because they were celebrating. And so I was very fortunate that that happened to me and not to one of my kids, because I can't imagine any of my players or my own kid having to go through that experience. So happy to expand on that, but I'll stop there for now, and then you just tell me where you want me to go with that.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And I can't begin to imagine, like I told you on our first call there, a friend of mine, I was on the phone with her the night that her son committed suicide in a very similar way, but he didn't jump off a bridge. He ran in front of a semi-tractor trailer truck. And I can't help but think of that night. And so, to have that happen to you, take us through like the dark part here for us. How did that affect you? What happened? And by the way, for those that are listening, the reason that I have Clegg here, guys think they come here for porn or sex addiction or overcoming some addiction. But I tell them it's not about the porn or it's not about the alcohol. It's about whatever is fueling it. And some people have some horrific tragedies that happened. And so you were able to only in 18 months endure this and actually come out the other side, sounds like for the better. So life, what happened after that?
Yeah. So that was a long evening. Obviously, police investigated the accident, and they had to double check, triple check everything that I said was facts. And because there were several witnesses, I went home, and I'd called my wife from the scene, and obviously there wasn't a whole lot that I could say other than what happened. And I guess there was a level of shock. I knew what was going on, but I still was like, holy crap, like this really happened to me. And then I kept going through this loop about, the individual that jumped, like, why, who are they? Were they a husband? Were they a father? I knew just by, visual appearance, it looked to be, mid 40s male. What was going through that person's life in the moment that was the choice that they made in that moment to end their life. And, I kept going in a loop. It wasn't necessarily the accident scene itself that kept going in a loop, but it was the questioning. And still to this day, I have no idea. I don't know the gentleman's name. I don't know anything about him. And it was a long night, no doubt. I think I slept like 20 hours. I mean, I think I missed the entire next day, but knew that I needed to get in to see some sort of counseling. And I did that the first day that I woke up. But I woke up to hundreds of text messages of, hey, it's not your fault. Hey, I'm sorry you went through this. Hey, wrong place, wrong time. Hey, I can't believe it. Do you want to talk about it? I'm here for you. Stuff like that. People trying to be kind, right? That's an unusual, like, how do you respond to somebody that goes through something like that? Like, I honestly, I don't know that I would necessarily how I would have handled that being a friend or a colleague of me.
Yeah.
But, I remember being with the counselor, and I don't know that I said a whole lot. Obviously, I told her what happened, and she got me in immediately. And there was a lot of silence. There was a lot of, for me, just questioning why me kind of thing. And once again, going through that loop in my mind about who he was, why he did that. being someone that's always been passionate about leadership, I questioned, like, gosh, did he have a bad boss? What was his work environment like? Did he have a job? And, some of the things you think about are kind of really strange and out there, and I certainly understand. But the weeks and months following that, I just wasn't present anywhere in life. I wasn't present with my family, and I've got 3 kids and a wife of 23 years. Um, I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't really want to eat. I didn't want to work out. I didn't want to do anything in my normal routine. I wanted to stay in bed and honestly just bury my head. And that went on for a few months till finally I was so sick of not being present. Now, had you asked my family or my wife, how's Clegg doing? They would have been like, oh, he's great. But never even talks about it. I don't think he thinks about it. He said no. And I wasn't really openly sharing. Now I continue to go to counseling, for 3 or 4 months. And really it was last summer. I knew that I was in a bad place. I knew that I wasn't being productive. I knew that I wasn't really being beneficial to anyone in my life. And so I was just scrolling YouTube, honestly, and I was Googling, I think, like trauma, transformation, those types of things. And I came across some videos by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And it, like, this whole idea of your future self just really spoke to me.
Yes.
And I mean, he's got hundreds of videos on there. I believe at this point now I've watched, I think, every single one or podcast that he's been on. I've been working with Dr. Hardy for the better part of the last year in some mastermind groups with him. He's been a big part of me becoming my future self. And even so much so that I've created my own program, group coaching, for people that are just stuck in life, that are looking for more. They may not know what more is, but they know they want it, called the Future You program. And so, so many things have happened since then, but the recovery really started when I started diving into trauma and this whole ideal around being the future version of yourself.
Yeah. And that's what I was really interested with your material, The Future You. Dr. Ben Hardy is awesome. That's how we know each other, through Dr. Ben Hardy's Future Self book and program. And the program is awesome. So I wanted to hear about your Future New program as well. But before we get into that, one of the things I heard you say is when after this happened, all these people reached out to you. But I always say the opposite of addiction is connection. And it sounds like you were disconnecting from people.
I really was. I didn't realize I was, but you can only tell the story so many times. I mean, most people knew what happened. I mean, when something like that happens, I mean, not that I'm like this big public figure or anything, but I am CEO of an organization, so I have a lot of connections through 20 plus years of being in this industry. I coach high school football, so many of these kids on the team I've coached even from their Pop Warner days all the way through high school. So I've got a lot of families that I've been involved with over the last 15 years. And so word did spread pretty quickly. And honestly, I think I told you the first time I really told the full story, I believe, was telling you, outside of obviously my counselor and really a select few people, but publicly, I've never told the full story. I've told part of the accident, through my TEDx talk and the recovery, but it really was more about the recovery than it was the accident and how I felt in the moment and actually what happened in the accident.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is cleansing. But ironically, one of my values is connection. But yeah, I think it's very safe to say that I was actively disconnecting.
Yeah. And that is the disconnection from people. It's what often fuels different types of addictions. and behaviors. So, but the cool thing is that you came across Dr. Ben Hardy's material, Future Self, Future You material, and I stumbled across Dr. Hardy's material as well. But I already was very active in the identity change because that's the whole Power for Eric story. You know, I went to all these programs where they say how you say you're powerless over things, and that didn't work for me. So I decided one day just to call myself Powerful Eric. And so that's why I was so attracted to Dr. Ben Hardy's material and your material as well. How did you turn things around, or did things get worse before they got better?
Yeah. I wouldn't say after that point it got worse. I would say this whole idea of becoming your future self was pretty intriguing to me. I mean, naturally, I think I'm a fairly ambitious person anyways, but I love my profiles. I love starting things, but not necessarily finishing things. And so this was, and let me take one step back. You have to understand when I discovered this and found this, you know, I'm running QWorks Group, which is my executive placement firm, as the CEO and co-owner, and really took my eye off the ball in a bad way, you know, just not being present. And it was the end of September when I realized that our accountant at the time had hired one of their family members to do the bookkeeping. Well, they had flipped debits and credits. They were listing debits as credits and credits as debits.
Oh boy.
And so when I woke up from, you know, this awful event and really started trying to be present, I realized that, yeah, as I was looking under the covers, that we had lost almost $500,000 in our business that year. And we weren't even in Q4 yet. So, you know, so throw that on top of the accident and all of the residual things that come from the accident. It was a pretty crappy place to be. But I have to be honest, because I had started dreaming about this whole ideal around the future self. I just put together some steps to overcome the challenge, made some very rapid changes inside of the organization. And you have to understand, we also hit an all-time high in revenue last year. So we had to pay commissions and bonuses on that revenue, even though we were losing a significant amount of money. And so that created this whole set of challenges. So all of this is going on in the back end. And, you know, Dr. Hardy says it's not how you do things, it's who you do them with, right? It's who, not how. And so I really adapted to that who concept and just started going out, trying to partner, connect with other who's that could help me get out of, one, my accident struggles, and two, the company struggles. And so I joined Ben's mastermind group in Q4 last year, and I really started doing some deep work. And one of the things that I work towards now is my mission is to humanize 1 million conscious leaders. And a conscious leader doesn't necessarily have to have that corporate title to be a conscious leader. A conscious leader is someone that's deeply introspective and highly self-aware. And most of us, actually like 85+% of us, are not self-aware, even though 95% of us will say that. Sure.
What do you mean humanize them?
Yeah. So you've already mentioned connection. You know, being a human is, you know, what separates us from, you know, the rest of the animal kingdom, right? It's our ability to learn, right? It's our level of intelligence and our emotions. But in the workplace and in life, we feel like, unless we're in the confines of our homes, we feel like we have to leave emotion out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't grow without emotion, because you can't get excited about a future without emotion. Excitement in and of itself is an emotion. And so embracing the emotions, you know, drumming up the appropriate emotions is part of that deep introspection. And that's what Dr. Hardy helped me with. Was I'd never journaled. I'd never done any of the things that he taught us, that 18 months ago before the accident, I would have called all that stuff like, I don't do any of that woo-woo crap. Well, that woo-woo crap is like, it's gold. It is magic. And I'm a believer. I was not, right? I mean, I was your prototypical male sports guy, coach, tough guy, alpha male, all of that.
Right.
That didn't get me anywhere, right? Not to say that I didn't have a level of success prior to the accident, but what I didn't realize that prior to the accident, I had reached a ceiling in my life that, and it was a self-proclaimed, I didn't even know it was there. I just said, you know what? This is as good as it gets. Now I was doing that automatically. I wasn't actively saying that because I wasn't actively keeping score on my goals and ambitions. Shame on me. And, at the time, a 49-year-old man, I started looking back going, man, I have had some success, but why did I stop? And what I realized was I had stopped dreaming. And so as I started journaling with Dr. Hardy in Q4 last year, there's a whole host of things that came up. And, I call it the power of the pen. You learn so much about yourself. That doesn't happen overnight, right? It just doesn't happen overnight. But it wasn't too long. It wasn't, too many weeks out where I really started identifying things that I had forgotten. And one of the things in, Ben's mastermind was at the end when I was really looking forward to what are some impossible goals for me to really set beyond Q4 for 2024. One of them was I'm going to tell this story of recovery on a TEDx stage. So I determined that in December of last year. And to me, that was everybody that's doing TED Talks, they're all like famous people, right? Those are people that have books. Those are people that, have changed the world in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know, right? I made a lot of assumptions, and it's one of the things we learned to question our assumptions. And so I started this idea of just asking myself one question, and this is, if for your audience that's listening, write this down. Asking yourself one question. So when I said, I want to do a TEDx stage, I want to be on a TEDx stage to tell the story of recovery within 5 years was my goal. That's what I was putting down on paper. The question is, what would have to be true in order for you to achieve that? So I go to the pen, I start journaling, and I start going through the process of, what would have to be true? Well, I need to have a book. Well, I need to be famous. Well, all these self-limiting beliefs, right? The lies that we tell ourselves, I'm writing on paper. And it did take me a few days to ultimately get to it. But what I realized was, like, if I'm going to do this, I had to commit. I have to be all in. And one of the things that I teach my clients is if you want to change, you can't wait until you feel good because you're not going to have confidence about change because change requires you to do something different. And two, most people wait for the capability to know how to do something before they commit to doing it. And that's why so many people are stuck. That's why 93% of people never achieve their goals.
Yeah.
Because they're waiting until they feel good or waiting to know how to do something. And I fully committed. I was all in. I burned the boats. And I said, I'm going to be on a TEDx stage within 5 years. And what I ended up coming up with is what would have to be true in order for me to achieve that was I'm going to hire a speaking coach. And so did some interviews, found a local guy to North Carolina, had a conversation with him. And what I figured was, I don't know how to do a TED Talk. I'm not a professional speaker. I don't even know how to land a TED Talk. Everything I read about it was like some things that I saw, it takes 50 plus times of applications before you even get one.
Actually, the average is 86 to get one talk.
Wow. So I hire someone who had already done 2 and who was a professional speaker. And he got me to apply the 1st of January or the end of December, rather, before the end of Q4. He got me to apply to a TEDx. And by the way, when I say he got me to apply, he told me to apply and I didn't. And I get a text message from him at like 3:00 before the 5 p.m. deadline. Clegg, everybody calls me Clegg, by the way, including my wife. Clegg, have you applied? I was like, should I even respond or wait till after 5 o'clock? So I responded, I was like, no. He goes, apply, please apply. You didn't hire me to not figure this out. Apply. This is built for you. This is made for you. I know it. I feel it. Apply. So I did. And a few weeks later, I got a phone call that they were intrigued about my story. And then, the process happens. You have to do an interview. You have to send a 3-minute video. There's this whole process. And I ended up being selected. But the point is that my mindset was what would have to be true. And so I responded, I answered, I journaled on that and came up with hiring a speaking coach, someone that's already, one, knows how to do it. So there was the capability that we usually wait for. It's his capability he was going to teach me. And then the confidence, I felt great because I was hiring someone. So I felt confident to apply, not because I knew how to do it or anything about it, or that I would get selected the first time I applied. I certainly didn't think that would happen.
Yeah.
But because I was all in, because I burned the boats, because I fully committed, it didn't happen in 5 years. I was on a TEDx stage within 5 months.
Wow.
And that was
Wow.
that was also a part of this recovery because, my mindset started changing about this future you. And oh, by the way, how I landed on doing a TED Talk or a TEDx was in my journaling. I had started coming up with things that happened to me as a kid and a lot of trauma. And, most of us know when our lives are crap, they tend to stem from things that happened to us when we were kids. And I mean, the first 7-8 minutes of my TEDx is all things that I remembered by journaling. I mean, my TEDx starts, picture this, an 8-year-old little boy standing on top of a bunk bed, holding a small Bible, pretending to preach to the congregation below. But in reality, the only member of the congregation was my 3-year-old little brother. Like when I was writing that, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about it because I remembered standing on that damn bunk bed, holding that small Bible, pretending to preach to my little brother. And I remembered the feeling of being in front of people. I remembered the feeling of dreaming, of ambition, of one day being in a stadium, in an arena, in front of thousands of people telling my story. Now, I didn't want to be a preacher, right? I didn't want to be standing on the pulpit, but that's all I knew at that time. I went to church on Sundays with my mom.
Mhm.
And so I remembered that. I remembered things about when my parents got divorced. I remembered things about my stepdad and all bad, bad, bad things that now I realized that, we all hear the victim mindset. And most of us ask the question, why did that happen to me? And I get that. I understand it's a natural response. Why? But in reality, what Dr. Hardy helped me with was, that why did that happen to me is a very victim mindset. It's a very fixed
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah.
Like I had anything to do with the event. Of course I didn't. But what Dr. Hardy says is shift your thought process from what happened to you to how did that happen for you? And when I met him, which is an entirely different story, probably for another episode,
Yeah.
but I met him during the Q4 challenge after I had declared the day before that he was going to be one of my who's. He said to me, and I said, Ben, I just can't get past this whole happened to me versus for me. I said, I just don't understand. I said, so basically that's me saying that someone else had to lose their life in order for me to have a good one. Like that's some selfish ass stuff right there. Like I don't even, he was like, no, Clegg, you don't understand. It's not, he's like, the past is yours. We don't control the events. Bad things happen to good people all the time. We cannot control the events, but what we can control is the meaning of those events.
Yes. Yes.
What can we pull out of why that was happening?
Yes.
What lessons have we learned? And I'm not, I get that. That was like a that was a massive breakthrough moment for me. Um, because I realized that I had the power of that event. I had the power of taking the meaning out of that event. And that's when everything really started coming together, and including going, I need to tell the story. I need to tell the things that I've learned about this recovery, about this process, about thinking about tomorrow, becoming the future you.
Yes.
And it was so powerful. And so I made that, I declared that goal. And my impossible goal is going to be to tell a TEDx, be on a TEDx stage, average Joe, in 5 years. But because I fully committed, it happened in 5 months. I'm going to start and found a new company called Leadership Squared, which Leadership Squared is a framework that I call the power of two, which is culture and connection, right? And that's the whole premise around humanizing 1 million conscious leaders, because you cannot be a conscious leader without deep introspection. Because look at all the things that I would not have had in life had I not found Dr. Hardy and realized the value of deep introspection. And then having high self-awareness. Self-awareness telling me, well, I don't know how to be on a TEDx stage, but I can find somebody that does. And so that set this chain of events into one, being on a TEDx stage earlier this year, starting and founding this company in January, making it profitable inside of just a handful of months, and now starting to grow this and create a program. And oh, by the way, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching, but I realized I couldn't help more people. I'm like, how am I going to humanize 1 million conscious leaders if I'm only meeting people one-on-one? And one of the things Ben told me in May, he's like, Clegg, you got to start saying no to things. You've got to start uncommitting from things in your life that don't serve a purpose to your mission. And so that's when I said, oh my gosh, I can start doing group coaching. I can actually start really professionally speaking, reaching more people.
Clegg, I hate to cut you off, but we're out of time for this episode. Don't worry, we'll have you back in part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into your journey and how these powerful principles can change lives. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, stay strong, stay focused, and keep channeling your energy into your goals. This is Powerful Eric signing off. See you in the next episode for part 2.
Thanks for listening. If you're struggling with porn or sex addiction, reach out to Eric at powerfuleric.com.